I'm going to show you this really, really cool tip here. Everything you ever need to know on the guitar inside this little magic box. Here's the box right here. That box occurs 3 times. And there's 3 places you can play it. The low, the middle, and then the high. And you can do so much cool stuff with those 3 little shapes there. Let me explain why this is so helpful. So let's take a look at kind of the weight of each note and the importance of each note. So I'm going to start on this middle one, the middle box. And it's 4 notes. So we're playing in the key of A, right? And you can slide this around wherever you want, but the root note is right here. So there's an A note. And then the other 3 notes are right below that on the 4th string is the flat 7. So you go flat 7, root, and then you got your minor 3rd here, and then you got the 4th. So those are the 4 notes. And I'll explain how you can use that to access a whole bunch of different scales and modes and licks and all kinds of cool stuff in a second. But first of all, let's look at the weight of each one of those notes. So the flat 7, that's a really important note in music. That's the note that makes rock music work. And what it is rock music is based around the idea of where you have major chords with minor notes against them. And that actually, when you have that, that actually creates what's called a dominant 7 chord, which is a major chord with a flat 7 in it. And that's the root of almost all rock music, is based around that idea of these kind of dominant chords, blues chords, rock chords. So that's a really important note. And then you've got your root note right here, which is obviously that's home. And then you got your minor 3rd here. So that's the same kind of thing as the flat 7. It's a minor note and it has that tension in it. And blues music and rock music is all about that tension. And then the last note here is a 4th, which is called a perfect 4th, and it's a relatively stable note, but it creates, when you add it over the 1 chord, it creates what's called a suspension, which is like a little bit of tension. So those are your 4 notes. Okay, so let's look at how you can kind of fill in the gaps around these notes, so still within this little box. So a big part of blues music and rock music is this idea of, I call it the nomadic 3rd. And what that is when you're playing, you're moving between the major and the minor 3rd. And the way you do that is to take this minor 3rd note here, and then you bend it incrementally. If you bend it up a half step, it becomes a major 3rd. So you can take that note there, right, the minor 3rd note, and if you just bend it or squeeze it, it pushes it towards the major 3rd. And there's a million kind of variations of that where you can create all kinds of like emotion by gauging the amount of squeeze that you put towards that major 3rd. Like if you go all the way up to that major 3rd, it kind of gives it that major sound, right? It kind of sounds happy. But if you don't quite get there, and you're basically just taking that sad sounding minor note, that tension, and then you're just kind of squeezing it, you're hinting towards that kind of more happier sound. And there's a million different variations of that where you can start on the minor, squeeze it towards the major but not quite get there, or the opposite, you can start on the major and squeeze it down towards the minor. So it's kind of like going from happy to sad or sad to happy. It's just, you can create different emotions by the way that you express yourself with that. And then the same thing happens when you get to this 4th right here. Within that note, you can access just by bending to what's called the blue note. And that's central to blues music, is the blue note. The blue note is basically a flat 5 note. And it's got like a diminished sound essentially. But what it does is it just gives you the sound of the blues, you know. So that blue note is really important, and how you get to that from this little box shape is you just squeeze up. And you can hear that beautiful tension. Now, if you go further than that and you do a whole step bend, you get to the 5th, which is a very stable sounding note. And that's kind of, other than your root note, the perfect 5th is a really stable, rich sounding note. You know, when you put a root and a 5th together, that's what gives you what's called a power chord. All right, so there's all the notes that you can access basically, and you can do that down in here in the bottom box. So you got your flat 7, your root, minor 3rd, major 3rd by squeezing it, or you can also hammer on, and then you got your 4th, flat 5th, Or if you do a big old bend, jump up to the middle position, you got your flat 7, root, minor third, major third bend. And then you got your 4th, flat 5th, and perfect 5th. Now, again, within that flat 5, perfect 5th thing, there's a myriad of different licks and ways that you can express yourself. So for example, same thing like we did with the major third, you can start with a whole step bend and then bend down to the half step, to the flat 5, and that gives you a certain kind of sound. Like that. It's very expressive, right? Or you can start with a half step bend and then bend down from that to the perfect 4th. It gives you a different kind of sound. It's kind of like a crying sound, but if you start on the 5th and then you pull down to the flat 5, it gives you a certain type of feeling. Whereas if you start on the flat 5, it gives you a different kind of feeling. And you can, people like Albert King or B.B. King were masters of that idea of just all these like bends and expressions that are kind of in between the cracks, in between the frets, where you can create certain emotions just by how much you bend or pre-bend and release. So kind of identifying those different bends is really, really important. Okay, so you got flat 7, root, minor third, major third, 4th, flat 5th, perfect 5th. And again, you can, instead of bending, you can just do hammer-ons. And then you go up to the top box right here, and it's exactly the same thing again. You got your flat 7. You got your root, minor third, major third squeeze, perfect 4th, flat 5th, and then perfect 5th. So with all that, it's just so much stuff that you can grasp there. So a couple of things, I'll show you a couple of things. So if you want to just play straight rock and blues, you can just use any variations around that. Just play around with it and just kind of see what you can get from it. But for example, if you wanted to play more of like a mixolydian sound, all you got to do is, mixolydian is basically the scale that fits perfectly with dominant 7 chords. So all you got to do with that is don't play the minor third, just play the major third instead, this shape. And then if you just use that shape and omit that minor third, it gives you a mixolydian sound. And then you can just do the slide. So it's all right there in that box, super cool. If you want to get a Dorian sound, all you're going to do is, instead of starting on the flat 7, just go down a half step and include that note, and then just play through that little box, but add in this little half step. And that gives you that Dorian sound that you'll hear, in a lot of jazz music. That kind of mysterious Carlos Santana sound or Miles Davis sound. And then if you want to get into playing really expressively, you just start to kind of find those notes and those bends in between the cracks. So exploring that minor third bend. Flat 5. And then everything in between. So there you have it. I hope you have fun with that and just find that little pattern and then slide it around. So I hope you find that helpful. Let me know what you think. It's kind of a cool way of looking at things where there's just a lot of stuff within a very simple little framework like that. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Let me know if you found this helpful. And remember, turn it up.